What's the good word? It's your boy DKB here. Welcome to episode one of Jets Therapy. It's a new, different channel, right? Well, same channel for me, anyways, but different avenue for us to kind of break down all of the things happening during this New York Jets season, and of course beyond. Um, and we'll kind of work through how everything works here, but I thought it'd be interesting, give you guys a chance to legitimately vent, whether that be for some of the worst moments we're sure to experience over the course of this New York Jets season, or it be some of the best moments. Anybody from a therapist background will let you know people can struggle in both the happy and negative times in life. So we aren't specifically a therapy channel by any means. It's just a little bit of a funny, title to come up with for this. But we're actually coming off of one of the most interesting weeks for the New York Jets in quite a long time. The New York Jets, it's been, I don't even remember what year the butt fumble was in. It's been quite a few years, though, for the New York Jets since they've been on a primetime Sunday night game. We're playing the Kansas City Chiefs in the last, 5-ish years, has risen to become the cream of the crop in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes already has a Hall of Fame type resume. In just a short span, right? He hasn't even reached a second contract with his team yet. And yet you're talking about multiple Super Bowls, consistent playoff entrances, and they're a tough out, right? Anytime you see the Kansas City Chiefs, you kind of expect them under the guidance of Patrick Mahomes to be at least in the AFC Championship game, nothing less than that. And he's pretty much proven to live up to that. So this was a huge game for this New York Jets team. We're reeling. We have one huge win on our resume against the Buffalo Bills, which was a very interesting situation itself. We're facing the Buffalo Bills, AFC East rival, a team that has risen to also perennially get to the AFC Championship game. It seems like, almost year in and year out. Josh Allen looks like one of those next I don't want to say generational, but top tier mobile quarterbacks that can get it done on the ground as well as through the air. And then you have all of the expectations and excitement that came from Aaron Rodgers coming from the Green Bay Packers to the New York Jets, and not in the general consensus that you see in the New York Jets acquire top tier free agents. We didn't throw a huge, ridiculous bag at Aaron Rodgers. We didn't blow, an entire cachet of draft picks to bring him in. Granted, probably a little bit more than we were comfortable with, but we were bringing in a Hall of Fame quarterback that a lot of people still felt like during a down year was a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. So you get him in. 4 plays into wearing a New York Jets uniform when it officially matters for a game, with, seeing him come in for a short stint during the final preseason game. He goes down with an ACL injury. Zach Wilson, who none of us expected to see the field in 2023, suddenly is thrust into the limelight. And, to be fair, shades of what we've seen in 2022, in spite of the lack of production and efficiency from a Zach Wilson-led offense. We got to see him go out there and the team as a whole rise up to help get us a early victory. We were riding high, and then you see the next 2 games, things tank. Leading into this Chiefs game where we were 1-2, a lot of people weren't expecting much, right? I showed you guys a lot of the score predictions prior to this game starting. You've seen a lot of blowout numbers, 26-6, 30+9. Very few had us really hitting double digits. And I think the floor basically for, the spread between them was 10 points. Nobody had us within less than 10 points of the Kansas City Chiefs. And it was looking that way right out of the gate. First quarter, they go up 17-0 on us. You see a lot of the same inability to move the offense under Zach Wilson that we've seen before. And then things flip. I don't know what happened to Zach Wilson. Towards the end of the first quarter, beginning of second quarter, you've seen a switch turn. Zach Wilson turned into an absolute superstar for us throughout the entirety of basically the rest of the game. He had that fumble, the end of the third-ish, which we never recovered back from. We just didn't get a chance for the offense to see the field again. But we've never seen this version of Zach Wilson, even in his best game. And I've said this a few different times prior to this game. If you ask somebody what Zach Wilson's best game as a Jet was, they were probably going to point to the Pittsburgh Steelers victory from last year. And a lot of people will still say we won in spite of Zach Wilson being on this team. So, there was a lot of things that I was irate about in this game. And, listening from some other people, I got to go back and watch the All 22 as well. There were a lot of incidents where the New York Jets did not get calls their way. Now, you can say the same thing for the Kansas City Chiefs, but the times that the New York Jets were impacted was absolutely egregious. Quincy Enunwa was on the Let's Talk Jets radio show, and he pointed out, the hold. And I want to say Bryce Huff was there along with Carl Lawson. Can't remember the exact details, but Isaiah Pacheco's touchdown run, egregious hold there that wasn't called. And then, of course, we have the two famous ones in the first quarter. The first one being the hold on Patrick Mahomes' huge, 25-plus yard first down run. All of the reasonings and stuff behind it are fair play, right? You have Jermaine Johnson, couldn't cleanly beat his man per se, but it was enough for everybody else in the stadium, people watching, on the national televised show, people like me watching through, whatever streaming apps and stuff that you have. Jermaine Johnson was cleanly held. There was a referee literally not more than 7 steps away from him, no kind of penalty whatsoever. That was the first thing that would have set us all off. It had me absolutely going crazy because it's one thing even if you don't see it, but then you see Jermaine Johnson start kind of panicking out. And I touched about this during the recap video. You see him start kind of like slapping and like running his hands over the helmet of the guy that was guarding him. And nothing, no reaction from the ref whatsoever. And then, we hear Jermaine Johnson's post-game press conference. And he mentions, I already had the unsportsmanlike conduct call on me earlier against this same tackle. Didn't want to do anything else to impact back. I'm just trying to draw attention to me being held. Probably should have gave some more effort there. And I'm still interested. We didn't hear anything from Robert Saleh yet about the league, explaining what happened there, right? And he's kind of softened his stance. He really just wants to know where the consistency was from, the beginning of the game to the end of the game with how things were called. I'm not necessarily there yet. I'm still a little bit fuming over it. But you have that one play. Then, not even 2 minutes later, you have the huge call against Sauce Gardner. I'm not arguing that whatsoever, right? Took a look at it. I think it could go either way. It's fine. Everybody has a problem with the timing of the call. And I pointed this out, and I got to find it. I'll put it up here for you guys in a bit. But even in the NFL rule book, it mentions that if a penalty occurs, and I'm paraphrasing here, I'll pull it up for you guys in a moment. When a penalty occurs after the change of possession, the team that last had the change of possession will end up, retaining that, and they'll tack the penalty on afterwards. We didn't see that happen. The New York Jets never got the change of possession. And, we got the penalty, and then we seen them continue to run the clock out essentially. I will not understand that until the day I die if we don't get a reasonable explanation for what happened there. And I've been trying to run around and ask a lot of people. We haven't, there's been really little to no clarification whatsoever about that specifically. The O-line blocking Jermaine Johnson was completely turned around to the point he could look Mahomes in the face. Yeah, and I heard Quincy Enunwa talking about that on the show, that he had him beat. He turned him around, and then at one point, you see him, revert back. And, I don't know, man. It bugs the life out of me that nothing happened there, right? There's a few different instances, obviously, where we could have had the ball in and where we should have had stops. But at such a critical point and juncture in the game, to not have something like that called, where you would imagine everybody's focus is heightened. Primetime game, eyes watching, we had the whole Taylor Swift drama swirling around as well. You'd think everybody would be pinpoint on what's going on here. I searched the rules. You can hold someone even if your hands are inside. And I spoke about this. I know when I originally did the recap, I wasn't sure if it was a hold or not. I know the eye test, it didn't pass for me. But let me also, I needed to find this because I was looking it up the other day, or maybe 2 days ago, when I was dropping my short about this. I want to see where exactly it was again. NFL rule book. Let's check this out, because unless my understanding is not correct, this is why this continues to be a huge pain point for me. So we have our rule book. And I want to say I ended up needing to, I don't remember what I used to look this up, but maybe it's under here, but I feel like it was under Rule 7 something. Live ball, dead ball. Series of down. Let's try turnover real quick. Order of the rules table. Forward pass, backward pass, scrimmage opportunity. Let's just check penalty enforcement. Number of downs after. So if a change or multiple changes of possession is negated by enforcement of a penalty against Team A during a play from scrimmage, the line to gain for Team A remains the same. No, that wasn't it. So none of these happened on the play. So none of these exceptions here really matter. Foul after change of possession. Okay, so if there is a foul, including a dead ball foul, after team possession is changed during a down, following enforcement of a distance penalty, it is 1st and 10 for the team that was in possession at the time of the foul. This is what I've seen. This is what I don't understand for why this wasn't a huge talking point, because I didn't hear it during the game. I haven't heard anybody really talk about it since. Everybody just keeps continuing to talk about the timing of it. If there was actually a hold or not, I think this is the bigger conversation here. Because from what I'm reading, we should have we should have possession of the ball, and they should have tacked the 15-yard penalty, 10, 15 yards, whatever it was, onto the beginning spot for the New York Jets possession. And we didn't have a double foul or anything else. So, yeah, I'm not sure what all that was exactly about. Again, something I'll just have to get over and take to the grave with me. But easily the thing that's upsetting me the most. And I do know there was the former VP of officiating, whatever his official title is. I know he came out, but he didn't really speak about anything either. He just pretty much said that he would have backed up his officiating, that Sauce Gardner did commit a holding penalty. Again, I think that could have been 50-50. It's very ticky-tacky one way or the other. I'm not too concerned about that either way. But yeah, that would be one of my biggest pain points there. But there's a lot of things to be upset about during that game. I've heard some stuff that I didn't particularly see or pay a ton of attention to that I've heard people, bring up on other various talk shows, podcasts, etc. I think you're misunderstanding that. The sauce foul occurred before the change of possession. The flag was just late. So that's what I'm saying we probably should use some clarity on, right? Regardless of when the penalty occurred, it should be based on when the flag was thrown, right? Because if you throw a flag right before the other team, let's say this same situation, we run the play, Sauce Gardner holds, the play is essentially over. You're seeing both teams line up again, and then the referee throws the flag. That makes no sense. The flag should be thrown at the point that the infraction occurs, at least in my eyes, and that's the kind of the way that I see it in the playbook, or at least that's something that I would assume that's the way it should be interpreted, right? But if you happen to be correct on this, I think that's something that they truly might want to revisit, because everybody's seen it on tape. You get the interception. The hold occurs way before the interception. You get the interception, or you get the hold. Michael Carter II gets the interception. The ref isn't even throwing the flag still this whole time. He kind of, I heard Quincy say he pumped fake. He took a couple extra seconds before Michael Carter cleanly got it in and started making moves. And then you see him toss it. Like, at that point, whatever the referee's saying and whatever the laws are, that is a New York Jets possession to me at that point. But I digress. Until we can get some further clarification and stuff, we'll just have to sit on that. But there's a lot of other takeaways from this game, right? The main one, of course, is going to be the Zach Wilson conversation. A lot of people have come out of the woodworks with various opinions on Zach Wilson. One of the most interesting ones, I think for sure, was definitely seeing Joe Namath. He did a complete 180 in a matter of days. You had him completely shred Zach Wilson for his incompetence at quarterback, right? He wanted him cut, traded, whatever the case was going to be. He just can't continue to be a quarterback for this New York Jets team. Versus post-game, you see him come back and he's kind of highlighting, the abilities of Zach Wilson, how good he can be. All these good things. And I haven't seen all of the specific comments, so I'm not sure what the exact rave reviews were from Joe Namath. But it's interesting, and I will say he's always kind of been a guy that he kind of goes with the flow when it comes to the quarterbacks. When they're doing good, he knows it. He recognizes the talent. He had the belief in the coaching staff to bring it out of them and the player to, live up to what his, physical capabilities said he could be. And when things are going wrong, and we know it's the New York Jets, and when things are bad, it's tragic. You see him absolutely rip them a new one. And, he's calling for coaching staff heads. He's calling for GMs to, go, because they haven't surrounded the quarterback with talent. And they're saying that the quarterback needs to be removed. We hit the draft or free agency for a new one. So not an opinion I've always trusted. It's one of those interesting situations where just because you've seen a player perform a job at an elite level, which, for his time, you can consider elite. But, for anybody that's been considerably above average or elite in their specific craft, that doesn't mean once you get into the training or the coaching realm of things that, that thinking, the thought process, everything that you've learned, skills you've acquired translates over to that position. That quarterback scramble is a huge weakness for this defense. Yeah, this is something I think a lot of us forgot, right? We heard the DJ Reed talk about this defense aiming to be legendary, up there with the 85 Bears, up there with the Legion of Boom, all of that good stuff. I had no problems with any of those. I do think those are targets and measuring points that we should try to achieve every season, for sure. Be a legendary team. I'm all good with that. I think a lot of what we forgot, though, is that, we talked about on the Jets Flight Squad podcast, there's the carryover from season to season is never the same. Even if you bring in the majority, if not all of your guys that doesn't mean you're also going to continue to have a fourth-ranked defense. Every season is different. The context of the games are different. We faced a lot of backup quarterbacks through no decision of our own last year. We did take advantage of still some of the better quarterbacks in the league, but there's a lot of things that went our way, right? Defense played out of their mind considering that they did have Zach Wilson and that offense that really couldn't muster a whole lot of anything at any point. But this season, we're forgetting. We were still concerned about the run defense, right? We signed Quentin Jefferson at the defensive tackle spot. He's a much better pass rusher than he is a run defender. We signed Al Woods, a beast of a run defender, gives almost no pass rush ability, and was a weird signing because not only is he the heaviest guy that we signed at the defensive tackle spot since Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh have been in the building, but even for somebody that has elite or, above average run defense, Robert Saleh generally likes the leaner, lighter folks. Maybe they have bigger muscle mass or maybe just crazy athletic freaks. But you generally don't see guys of his size, 330 plus, rolling around on Robert Saleh's defensive unit. So I had questions about it early in the offseason. How would he be, initiated into this defense? Obviously, you see some of the benefits that he would be able to take up two blockers, which gives you a better opportunity for Quentin Williams to see one-on-one matchups, guys on the edge, the JJs, Jermaine Johnsons, Carl Lawsons, Will McDonald out there, even Bryce Huff should be in a better situation like that. But it still didn't make a ton of sense, right? For the most part, the mantra for Robert Saleh in that line has been attack the quarterback. If it happens to be a run, then attack the ball carrier on your way to the quarterback. But assume quarterback has the ball every time. So a signing like Al Woods screamed more desperation to me than anything else. I don't think they liked a lot of the other options that were potentially available at the time. Probably weren't willing to risk depending on the draft, which I think was a smart move. But that's also why it sucked to see guys like Jonathan Marshall, get picked up by the Steelers. You have a guy, and we just brought him back. What was my man's name? He's been living on our practice squad for a while now. It'll come back to me. We had some backup guys, and, for whatever reason, the coaching staff doesn't tend to want to rely on them. Instead, we opt to go the route of Solomon Thomas, a guy that is not necessarily great at anything, right? Robert Saleh's justification for the Solomon Thomas type players in this defense is that they're continuously still wearing down defenses, right? They're defensive line warriors. They're battling these offensive linemen. They're continuing to get them tired out, whether they get the sexy stats like the sacks and the tackles for loss or any turnovers is irrelevant because they're still doing their job to wear out the offensive line, which is fine and great. But ideally, the way he's built out his defensive line, you want a starter at every possible depth spot, which you can say on the edge you do between Carl Lawson, Jermaine Johnson II, Will McDonald. You can argue Bryce Huff, but if you want to utilize him as an elite pass rusher, you still feel very good about that. We still had guys like Bradley and Nye, who I was excited about, at the time. So a lot of players on the edge that you would say would be starters on most other teams in the NFL. In the defensive interior, it's Quentin Williams, and then it's essentially everybody else. So it's interesting. Well, we'll kind of see how we plan on attacking getting Quentin Williams a true, long-term running mate now that he has his contract extension. But I say all that to say we probably should have always expected, and this is from running backs, let alone the mobile quarterbacks, that we were going to struggle in the running game. When Quentin Williams was off the field, we seen how, they just ripped through the interior of our defensive line. When he was on the field, that's a different story. But overall, running backs had a decent amount of success last year. We haven't done a ton of improvement in terms of beefing up the interior. And then you take a look at the linebacker core, and obviously, CJ, he's lost a step. Still a very, very good player. but he's lost a step. If he gets outsmarted or he's out of position in any kind of way, it can lead to big holes. Quincy Williams has been a bit of a revelation. I just posted about him not too long ago, but he's, essentially leading the league as one of the better linebackers, not only in coverage, but in his run stopping ability this season. And he's made huge improvements. We haven't seen really any of the dumb plays that we've seen from last year where there's unnecessary penalties, unsportsmanlike conduct, or unnecessary roughness fouls. He has done a number to improve. This is actually looking like a legitimate all-pro season by him. And then, of course, you got your Jamin Sherwoods and stuff, and I'll say he's looked adequate. Probably not quite to the level of like a Quan Alexander per se, but he's not a liability. So nonetheless, struggles in the run game definitely should have been expected. Mobile quarterbacks, we've seen how Josh Allen destroyed us a lot last year. It was good to see us, even though he still had big plays, kind of limit what he did in week one. But I would say this should be the expectation, especially with a guy like Tony Adams out. I think he was supposed to be our difference maker. That thigh contusion has really kind of done a number on him. I didn't think he'd be out for a couple of weeks like this. But if he comes back, I would honestly say that you'll probably see a lot of that get mitigated. You can really use him as your spy if you feel comfortable with teams not trying to go, attack the deep parts of the field, especially with the cornerbacks that we have. But I would say Tony Adams will kind of be that X factor to nullify a lot of that. Wow, Wave, what's the good word, my guy? The Michael Clemens weight gain might have been a mistake. Yes, he's another guy that I chatted about. I want to say right before the regular season started, when you took a look at his preseason activity, he's not having the same impact with more volume than what we saw from him last year. He dominated in preseason in 2022. This preseason for 2023, we didn't see the same effect. And I do think it's because I won't say it's the weight gain. I would say him being on the interior hasn't had the same effect we would have expected with, people kind of considering him a JFM understudy. We talked about RAS scores and all of those, fun numbers. He looks much better as an athlete inside, but it's an entirely different game, right? You're playing more of a two-gap situation most times. You're in a phone booth, which he's not accustomed to. So not only do you have to kind of be wary of your guys and which lanes they're trying to hit and attack, but you also have more double teams coming your way. You have guys that are generally now much more bigger than you on the interior, 330-plus pound guys. That weight gain was always going to be mandatory if we was going to give him this role. But he doesn't have the same level of technique that John Franklin Myers has and the explosion that John Franklin Myers has to make that same kind of conversion. So I do think it'll be interesting to compare Michael Clemens to John Franklin Myers, compare Michael Clemens to Solomon Thomas by the time the season's over. Because Solomon Thomas is essentially the bottom of the barrel for the defensive line. So if you are getting better production than him, perfect. I think in a new role for Michael Clemens, that's about the best that you can ask for. If he's performing worse, I would argue then that you keep him back on the edge, then utilize him as a elite edge setting run defender who gives you a little bit of a pass rush pop. And you find a different guy to take over that John Franklin Myers role. But it couldn't hurt, right? Season's still long. I do like Aaron Whitecotton as our defensive line coach. This is the most talent we've squeezed out of a defensive line that I can remember, at least dating back to when we had, Muhammad and Sheldon, Richardson, Snacks, all of those guys. Obviously, it was a 3-4 defense, but still, it's a long season. We'll see, but that would be the guy that I would look to. Solomon Thomas as a pure defensive tackle for the most part, but has played edge previously with the 49ers versus Michael Clemens, who's just now kind of hitting that dual role territory. But I want to say Michael Clemens isn't getting a huge amount of volume, right? I think he's hovering, and let's double check. But I want to say Michael Clemens is seeing like 20-something% of the snaps so far. Michael Clemens on the season has 115 snaps on defense, so he's playing about 39% of the snaps on that defensive line. It's a pretty decent number. I'm going to have to take a look into what the breakdown is on the interior versus the edge. But yeah, he's a guy that I wouldn't say expect a ton of impact from, right? If you get the occasional offensive line where you have maybe more of a zone, system from them, and you're getting some of those more lighter, agile guys, I would say, expect a better game from him. He'll be able to take a lot more advantage of those guys than you will anybody operating generally a gap scheme or a run power scheme, where they're going to have some of those stronger, heavier footed, bulkier guys in front of them that he's going to have a hard time just trying to knife through to the quarterback. It's actually the whole D line, but I think they'll get it together. They do seem a little bit underwhelming, right? I think right now we're like 20. Let me see if I could pull it up again real quick. I want to say we're like in the low 20s right now when it comes to like sacks. Not sure where we're at in pressure rate and all of that kind of stuff just yet. But let me see here. So for the Jets, okay, yeah, they don't have it broken down by sacks, at least on Pro Football Reference. But yeah, 39% is pretty solid for him. If anything, it's a little bit of a slight increase. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. He has to develop somehow, right? Mm. Let me show you guys what I see. So right now we are 14th in scoring, 23rd in yards allowed. Top 10 in turnovers, which I think the Chiefs game obviously helped, but I want to say we were in the mid-20s right before that as well. Running game, yeah. All of our rushing numbers aren't great. We're pretty much bottom of the barrel there. Yeah, we'll see how that pans out. I think the D-line will play better if we're closer in games or leading. We need to take the ball when we win coin flips. I heard a lot of people actually mention that more recently. I actually have a preference to defer the ball every time. I think if you look at having us, let's assume we're talking about the New York Jets being above average or like an elite team, right? Um, you would imagine that you're able to control things in the first half of the game, right? Doesn't mean you have to blow out the team, but whether you're, neck and neck, you guys have a tied up score, whether you're consistently beating them out and maybe you're up 3 to 7 points, whatever the case is, if you can at least match or outscore them in the first half, then when you come out in the second with the ball, you have a opportunity to go out there and just kind of drain the life out of them immediately. When you take a look at the Chiefs game, for example, we had the two opportunities right before the half started, the missed field goal, and then, of course, the interception, which gave us the opportunity to go out there and try to score again. The Chiefs, you can kind of feel that they were reeling, right? Pretty concerned about how things were starting to get out of hand, the way Zach Wilson was looking, that atmosphere at MetLife. And then you come out in the second half, and Zach Wilson goes and leads his team down 75 yards, which, by the way, a lot of people are taking a look at the box score sheets and all that stuff. But considering the last couple games, we've had maybe 3 drives that have lasted more than, 3 plays. And then you come out and almost this entire game, you see him leading his team down the field. It wasn't necessarily a matter of field position, although we also got a great couple looks at that. That was huge for us, right? We, couple big Brees runs, couple just decent overall, chain moving plays. But nonetheless, Zach Wilson being able to lead some 40, 50, 60, 70 plus yard long drives was clutch to me. We haven't seen anything like that. And it wasn't huge chunk plays at a time. This was actually methodically slicing and dicing up a defense, which was a beautiful sight to see. That has been rare, very rare for us, right? But yeah, as far as the coin flip goes, I would prefer to defer every time. Even if you do happen to be down, we were in the Chiefs, it gives you a chance to come back. You kind of build some early momentum. You can keep that thing going. With a defense like ours, I also don't think it necessarily matters. I know a lot of people have kind of been they've kind of been after the defense, of course, because we've been starting off slow. And what I've said in regards to that, right, is that when you take a look at this team as a whole, the offense and the defense as well, at one point, special teams was really the only unit that was going out there and really giving us big plays, whether that was flipping the field or whether that was Xavier Gibson going out there and giving us some solid plays. The team looked uninspired. One of the nicks against Zach Wilson prior to this Chiefs game was that the team doesn't believe in him. We had the reports that the defense, was getting upset about having to stay on the field as often as they were because the offense can't do their job under Zach Wilson. You have Tim Boyle in the weight. Any other quarterback is, we have multiple discussions about that would be able to come in, immediately lead this offense to some success. Doesn't mean a ton of points. Didn't mean a ton of yardage, but we know that we weren't going to be seeing 3, 4, 5, 3 and outs in a row, and the defense playing, almost 100, plays on the field because the offense is seeing that much time and possession, having that many amount of plays to capitalize on. You're going to be tired. I've been there at one point, practicing on teams and trying to play in games and all that kind of stuff, where at one point, when you're taking a look up and you've been on the field for 13 plays already, and then you got to look back over at Zach Wilson and you're going to have at best maybe a minute and a half to rest before you have to go back out there and, hopefully avoid doing the whole thing all over again. That gets demoralizing, wearing and tearing on you very, very quickly. So I think you'll see this defense bounce back. Again, we were ranked, middle of the package right now. I think you could see a huge turnaround, especially if Zach Wilson can keep these type of performances up. And having the defense, as you mentioned, boycott, if we're playing with more leads, we're playing with, better football situational awareness. I think you'll start to see them shine. The turnovers are coming. Obviously, the huge game in week 1 from Jordan Whitehead helped out the numbers. But overall, you're seeing a lot of these quarterbacks press. Patrick Mahomes, a lot of unlikely throws that he wouldn't have made against many other teams that the New York Jets were able to force. And so I think you'll see us being able to play a lot more complementary football again, as long as you can get anything close to the version of Zach Wilson that we've seen against the Chiefs. Bro, we was robbed of an extra interception. You know what's interesting to me? And I was going to do a video on this, but it's hard to find all the footage and everything. I feel like every time that Michael Carter, the second, gets himself a turnover, the defense has something called on them that negates it. Some kind of play prior to the change of possession, whatever the case is. But Michael Carter II would be looked at so much more differently if he had those extra. Off the top of my head, he has at least 3 or 4 interceptions over his short career so far that he should have on his resume that he hasn't, because either CJ Mosley's been flagged or, what we had with Sauce Gardner getting this holding penalty. It's absolutely ridiculous. Maybe I'll try to invest some time on it when I can at some point. But yeah, man, let alone the fact that he's already very underrated. When you talk about cornerback duos, DJ Reed, Sauce Gardner obviously get the highlights. But when you talk about cornerback trios, suddenly, a lot of people won't argue that the New York Jets at worst are top 3. DJ Reed, Michael Carter II, Sauce Gardner. You can't really name another unit off the top of your head that's, better well-rounded or more elite than those guys are. Michael Carter II, by far, especially as a shorter stature guy and all of that stuff, and the different roles, the different matchups that he gets, he's definitely one of my most favorite underrated players. DJ Reed gets a lot of hate too, but Michael Carter II in the slot, he's doing a lot of the grimy work at his size that a lot of people shouldn't be able to handle and take advantage of. So, I'm hoping for his sake when he does get a lot of these turnover plays, because he's bound to fall into some more. I'm hoping that he can keep those on his resume, because it's tough looking at his stats right now. And, at first glance, they don't look like anything special. But I can promise the general naked eye to people that aren't aware of this New York Jets defense, that guy is basically borderline elite when it comes to slot cornerbacks. So I couldn't be more than happy to, see him on the field. I think it spoke volumes that he was able to steal the job from Javelin Guidry when he was coming in. And a lot of people loved him as well. So kudos to him. He definitely needs his flowers in this New York Jets defense. There's a lot of things we wouldn't be able to get away with without him. The holding call on Sauce was BS. Yeah, I'm not going to keep harping on it too much. As I mentioned earlier, I think it could really go 50-50 either way. I do think there's a lot of bumping and, hand checks and all of that stuff in the first 5 yards, which is fine. I wouldn't say there was anything specifically holding. After that, it's whoever's game. There's nothing we're going to be able to say that's really going to change it at this point in time. But it was a tough way to go out. I truly think in my heart of hearts, not just as a New York Jets fan or a homer, but if the New York Jets would have had just a opportunity to get the ball back, Zach fumbled that away, but nonetheless, there was a lot of stops that we should have had. If the offense had the opportunity to, I think the entire football world felt like we were going to be able to go down there and get a touchdown. So it is what it is. I prefer to deferring to, 100%. Even on Madden, I don't have a ton of time to game and stuff anymore, but there's not a game I play in, whether that's real life, pickup football, Madden, etc., where I'm not saying we need to get the ball back in the second half. Michael Carter II is so underrated. Yeah. I think the difference in this pass rush is Carl Lawson falling off. I won't say it's falling off. If I want to be honest here, I think that back issue is still a very relevant concern for Carl Lawson. He looks a little bit robotic. Footsteps and different things are choppy. And I've had back issues that crept up on me before. It's almost like it's like you get little jolts of lightning in your back, right? And then obviously you have your spine and, that being connected to your brain and all of that good stuff. It limits a lot of what you're, capable of doing. You might feel fine 1 minute. Excuse me. You might feel fine 1 minute. And then the next you get a couple of those jolts and you might be able to move through the pain, but I promise you're not moving anything close to what you have. So, he's coming off of the ACL injuries. Now he has that back concern, which, the way things stand right now, we never really get 100% of the truth when it comes to injuries for our Jets players. Timelines are off. Severity of issues are off. Pre-confirmed medicals don't match up with, the expectations of what happens when we originally see injuries versus what the results end up being, which isn't anybody's fault, but we've seen enough examples of this that it's pretty annoying at this point. We haven't done a good job handling that. So I do think we have a great team, the, Atlantic Health Performance and Training team. I do think they're great at what they're doing. Whatever happens when it comes to communication piece is definitely lacking. But I think the injury for Carl Lawson's back was underplayed. I think he's trying to play through it right now because he really wants to help this Jets team see some level of success. And I think, he is a fierce competitor. So I'm sure a lot of that is watching Jermaine Johnson, we say earn the role of being a starter on this defensive line. There really wasn't much of a competition because Carl Lawson, that back struck him pretty early and then he was out for the majority of the preseason. So it was almost kind of like what we're seeing right now with Mekhi Becton and Dwayne Brown. We expected him to succeed based on what we saw. But now that he's kind of gotten the ball rolling, it wouldn't make a ton of sense to, go back to a Dwayne Brown or go back to a Carl Lawson. So if I'm the Jets and knowing the kind of defensive line depth that I've had and some of the players that you can think about trying to bring into this team, whether that be on offense or defense, I would put him on IR for a couple of weeks, see if he can come back healthy after, 4 or 5 weeks. And you see a different level of explosiveness from him. If not, then you get to play around with, some of your bottom tier roster guys. Maybe you want to start calling up a Jason Brownlee. Maybe you, want to take a look into who else is on our practice squad right now. Maybe you call up a Tanzel Smart, see if you can give him some opportunities. One of the other various linebackers that we had. There's a lot of different experimenting stuff that they can do to replace a Carl Lawson at this point. So how about Quincy, all-pro season? Yeah, chatted about him a little bit. He's been killing it. I think right now, from what I saw on my post, actually, let me just pull it up and see. The little snapshot that I seen basically said, I believe that he is leading the league. And hold on, here we go. So Carl Lawson leads all linebackers with 23 tackles that result in a defensive stop through the first 4 games. And he has 3 pass breakups, which also tie for the position. But the cherry on top is that he has a 90.2 PFF grade in coverage. Coverage has not been a strong suit of Quincy Williams at any point so far during his tenure with the New York Jets. We were getting absolutely shredded by screens, whether that be the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Most of the offensive game plans are going to be centered around attacking our linebackers, whether that be because CJ is a little bit slower, whether that be because Quincy Williams is very undisciplined. But he's shored a lot of that up. I'm very excited about what Quincy Williams can do because you're not seeing a step back. What you kind of see common a little bit amongst other players is that you may see them increase their skill level in an area that was generally a weakness for them before, and you see them take a step back from some other things. But you're still seeing the hard hits. You're still seeing great angles, or I should say even better angles. that Quincy Williams is taking to limit yards after catch or yards after run. You're seeing him still be able to live in the backfield, shoot through gaps effectively. And now you're adding on the fact that he's not a liability. He's actually a bit of a weapon in pass coverage. I think is huge for the New York Jets. It's absolutely it's pretty amazing development from him. He's looking like that next great, linebacker that Robert Saleh's pulled out of the gutter and turned into one of the best in the league. Injuries caught up to Lawson. Facts. If Dalvin Cook doesn't produce against Denver, we need to cut ties. Yeah, so I don't think cutting him will be the solution at all, right? If anything, worst case scenario, I think he gets the treatment that we saw James Robinson get. Now, with that said, Robert Saleh and them haven't been a fan of making players look bad in like the public light, and obviously given Dalvin Cook's recent success, I'm sure they would be hesitant to make it look like he's already a failed addition for the Jets. But let's take a look at this contract. Okay, so signed a 1 year, $7 million contract with us. $5.8 million of that was guaranteed. And if we were to try to cut bait, why does this sound like it doesn't add up to me? So we already basically gave him the majority of his contract as a signing bonus. Right. Or he at least got them as bonuses. Unless the contract that he had from the Vikings is eating up the majority of that. Okay, well, at least from what I'm understanding here, we're actually only going to get hit with just over $1 million in dead cap space. I would cut him, to be honest. If I'm looking at this and this is legit, that we would only lose $1 million, I'd cut him. I mean, to me, the same conversation about the defense is the same conversation that I believe applies to Dalvin Cook. He looks uninspired. He looks like he's given up before he even hits the hole most times. There's no speed. There's no burst. I don't see the power. I don't see any elusiveness. I don't think I've seen him really try to put on like a hit stick or a stiff arm on anybody. So at this point, it's like, what are you really contributing to the offense, right? I think he's just at or below like 2 yards per carry. I would feed the guys. To me, if that's true, I cut him. I take the $1 million hit. And then, of course, whatever you already guaranteed him. But I take the hit. I would bump up Michael Carter, and I really like the kid that's on our practice squad, Xavier Valade. I think he's a pro-ready running back that'll come in. I think he'll give us a huge boost and, maybe a 10 to 12 snap ratio a game. And I call it a day. To be fair, I don't know what Breece Hall was originally imagining when we had the whole drama about him not, when the earlier rumors came out and Breece Hall basically was saying something like he's good with the running backs in the room already. This is kind of what I envisioned. Dalvin Cook comes in, he either messes up the chemistry of the locker room or he's not a significant portion, of this running game, considering the running back room. And so now you're sitting there wondering, why did we waste resources bringing a guy in when we were already fine? Michael Carter looks solid. Still some things we need to have him clean up. We see what Breece Hall looks like. We're unleashing the Breece. for this game. It just happens to be ironic that it's against the Broncos, where we already have bad blood with, and then of course that's where he tore his ACL. But yeah, I don't know. Dalvin Cook is kind of like the Jordan Poole of the NFL world to me. Like, he might have looked great before, but now that he's with the Jets, he looks unhappy. He looks uninspired. Doesn't look committed. It's like once Aaron Rodgers went down, all the motivation for him to be great, went with him. Still should have signed Quan Alexander. Considering the contract that he signed, I'm 100% with you on that. But I really did still want to see Jamie Sherwood. So I'm not going to say it was a bad move that we didn't make one way or the other. Quan's still doing good right now. Jamie Sherwood is definitely still playing solid in my opinion. I don't think it was a huge miss in any way, but obviously we probably have a little bit more bump up in linebacker play. But at some point you got to give these young guys a little bit of run, and I don't think Jamie Sherwood's really going to be a detriment to us. Hit the like button. Appreciate you, my boy. I wouldn't cut Cook because he can always return to form and he can teach the young guys, but I would sit him for Izzy. It's an interesting perspective. The way that I look at it is, if I'm in the running back room, we have a short shelf life already. You're taking up potential snaps that I could show out in. And, that would look as elite as, if I'm a running back, I want to get every opportunity I can to put some elite film on tape. We know they have a short shelf life. We know how hard it is for them to get decent secondary contracts. I want to take advantage of the opportunities I have, especially if I have an offense where I have weapons around me, in the wide receiver tight end room. It's not me just being ran 30 plus times a game. I can look great in my, 40% share of the offense. If I'm behind a guy like Dalvin Cook in the depth chart and I'm saying you're getting, let's just say 10 rush attempts a game, you're coming out with 20 yards. I should be able to beat that easily. I'm 22, whatever it is. I'm young. I have fresh legs. I'm probably more athletic, well-conditioned, and stronger than Dalvin Cook at this point. And so, yes, you have the leadership traits. You have the experience. You can teach me about the finer points of playing running back in this league. But for the most part, I don't want to undersell the mental part of the game for running backs. But generally speaking, they can go out there and they can perform based on their athletic ability, if that makes sense. Generally, if you can run a guy over, you can outrun somebody, or you're very elusive, you'll do well out of the gate, even if you don't understand how to pass block great, even if you don't understand which lane you should necessarily be hitting all the time. You can kind of make lemonade out of lemons. Dalvin Cook isn't doing any of that. And so I would question why I even want to take advice from a guy like him that's ahead of me if he's performing that terribly. And then, of course, he's taking money away from the team and, all that stuff that I just chatted about. So I don't know if running back is one of those positions where you necessarily need a veteran in the room. Talked about this during the offseason as well. But in this case, like, if you were going to keep a guy, you should have kept who was the guy that we had brought over from the 49ers again? Tevin Coleman. You should have just kept him. Keep a veteran that at least has already been on the team for a couple of years and at least can speak to the New York Jets environment and how they want to do things and the message and all that kind of stuff. Dalvin Cook's just a recent guy that's coming in, and now he's not doing anything overwhelmingly positive to help the team. I see him being more of a hindrance than anything. It'll be interesting, though, if we see him have some kind of random turnaround. I don't see it coming. And like, even with Zach Wilson, for example, you've seen, even if it's only for like a few snaps here, or maybe a series here, or maybe just something you saw in practice in a preseason game. You've seen certain plays, certain things where you say, okay, if we can get that, instead of 1 out of 10 times, we can get that to 5 out of 10. I would feel better about him. Dalvin Cook hasn't shown us anything. There's literally been nothing because he didn't have an off season. He comes in. We haven't really seen him during regular season practices and stuff. But you haven't seen anything from Dalvin Cook to make you think, okay, this guy can suddenly turn the corner. Thoughts on the rest of the schedule. So I did chat about it on one of my videos, at least for like the next couple of games. We knew that the first portion of this New York Jets schedule was always going to be the hardest, right? We were facing some teams that were generally playoff contenders, Super Bowl hopefuls, all that kind of stuff. So you're talking about, let me see, where are we at here? So obviously we had the Bills. We know who they are, division leaders, playoff, AFC championship contenders. Cowboys, we knew the defense was elite. You never know what you're necessarily getting per se with Dak Prescott. So, may have been an iffy game. The Patriots, I expected us to win. The Chiefs looked like an L, right? So 2-2 was probably my best guess in the first 4 games. But taking a look at things now, the Broncos look like a very winnable game. They seem to be struggling. Obviously, we feel good coming off this recent Zach Wilson performance. The Eagles, we've seen them be vulnerable to some interesting teams recently. So I think there's an outside shot that you can shock them. Maybe it's a trap game of sorts, right? The Giants, I think, again, another very winnable game. The Chargers are starting to have a terrible bout of injury luck. And so while you're still facing Justin Herbert, that defense doesn't look as, savage as it could be. So I think there's definitely strong opportunities there. The Raiders looks winnable. The Bills, I will automatically say at this point, I think that we can stand with them in any game with how we've been able to respond to them the last 2 years. Texans, they're roaring around, so it'll be interesting to see if CJ Stroud is still kind of galvanizing and improving that unit. I think they could be sneakily good by the time we see them, but as of right now, I would say winnable. Dolphins is scary to me. Obviously, we still have to play them twice. Falcons, I think, is winnable. Commanders looks winnable. Sam Howell looks pretty injury-prone, turnover-prone, not injury-prone. He looks pretty turnover-prone. They haven't utilized a lot of the speed weapons that they have there between McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. The Browns, it all depends on if Deshaun Watson can turn the corner. They're kind of having their own Zach Wilson-like situation there, except you're talking about buying high on a former great-looking quarterback that hasn't been able to recapture that energy. So could be a tough game in terms of like a low-scoring defensive battle, but I think is winnable. And Patriots is still a very winnable game to me. So legitimately, what's that? 5, 6, 7. I think we should be able to win at least a solid 7 of our next, 14 games or whatever it is. Obviously, that's going to put us at like an 8-9 record. So we're going to have to overachieve on a couple of things. But there's opportunities for win streaks. So Broncos to the Eagles is tough. But you talk about the Giants, the Chargers, the Raiders being 3 games in a row that you think you can, squeeze out victories on. Then you have the Falcons and the Texans before the Dolphins. And then you have, the Commanders and the Patriots squeezed in between the Browns. So couple win streak opportunities. Maybe you can continue to build on that. But yeah, I think there's definitely a possible shot for us to still be in a playoff setting, in the month of December. after the bye week, those 11 games look winnable. Yeah, I mean, a lot of them, injuries have already struck in, so they're missing a lot of, the engines for their offense. You take a look at the Browns. Kareem Hunt hasn't looked great right out of the gate, but, they lose Nick Chubb. The Patriots don't really have anybody. I talked about the Commanders. They're not really utilizing a lot of the speed and what would make them a dynamic offense. And, they're also having some issues with the new offensive coordinator. What's his name? Eric Bieniemy. Some players like the coaching style is one of those old school guys. Some of them, not so much. Texans, young unit, not a whole lot of resources poured into them just yet. So anything that they do in terms of getting a win, you would assume that they're overachieving. Falcons, not sure what their deal is. I like Desmond Ridder as a quarterback, but defense is very up and down. Offense is very inconsistent. They do have some dynamic players, Bijan Robinson being over there. Cordarrelle Patterson, I believe, still rocking with them, although in a reduced role. And they have Drake London, they have Kyle Pitts. So they have some pieces. They just haven't figured out a way to really capture what they were able to do last year in terms of being a top-tier run team that takes advantage of, play action and, making big plays. So there's definitely some opportunities for us. There's 3-4 losses if Zach Wilson continues his Kansas City play. Eagles, Bills, Dolphins, Texans. Boycott, what are you talking about? Are you saying that we're going to lose those games, or are you saying that if we get the way Zach Wilson played against the Chiefs, those are games we would win? To be fair, if we're getting that version of Zach Wilson, I think we are in any game. Personally, we did a great job of generally not allowing more than 14 points last year. If Zach Wilson plays that way, I think you see an inspired defense to keep things that way. And so, if Zach Wilson can get 2 touchdowns on his own, you imagine Breece Hall could probably get himself a touchdown at least every game. Maybe you see some, outstanding games from Michael Carter on occasion. I don't know. I mean, anything's possible at this point. Right now, I think the moral victory that we're coming off of, a lot of people are just waiting to see if that was a one-off exception to the rule that we know Zach Wilson to be, or if that is a sign of things to come. Also, for what it's worth, if Aaron Rodgers does, in fact, return after that Week 7 bye, it'll be interesting to see what kind of impact that he has on the team again as well. He'll be able to be in all the meetings. He'll be at the games, essentially playing as like a pseudo coach. And so, the team seems to respond to him being around the building and being in game settings and all that kind of stuff. So that could have a pretty huge impact for us as well. But with that said, I appreciate you guys that came to hang out. Let me know what you guys think. If there's a better time that you guys would like to see me run this through. Daytime's pretty hard, but in general, just throw out some times for me that you think may work better for you guys. I'm actually dropping this as an official podcast as well. So I should have this on like Spotify and all that kind of stuff. We'll see how big we can build this up. But Episode 1, Jets Therapy. I'm sure as the weeks come, we'll get some crazier people in here, ready to spit some venom, spew their hearts out. So we'll see how things go. But appreciate you guys coming through. Hope you enjoy the rest of the night. I'll catch you guys again. Peace.